Republican and Democratic senators from the United States were in Ottawa this morning, meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney, as both countries remain locked in trade talks trying to reach a deal, hopefully, by August 1st. Both Carney and the senators called it a good meeting. And that positivity was also on display in the Canada-United States bracelets that the senators wore, and in their focus on working together.
You are our best friends, and the relationship is going through some great strain.
We are bridge builders, not people who throw wrenches.
We do think that the framework of the USMCA gives us an opportunity to kind of, in one framework, come together and improve on something that was a great bipartisan success.
President Trump's rhetoric about the 51st state. That is his statement. I don't think that that's constructive, quite honestly.
Well, tomorrow, Prime Minister Carney is meeting with lawmakers from this side of the border. He'll be here in Huntsville, Ontario, to meet with Canada's premiers. And U.S. trade talks, of course, are at the top of that agenda. Someone who knows that all too well is David MacNaughton, the former Canadian ambassador to the United States. He's also here in Huntsville, and he joins me now. David MacNaughton, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
So you're here to provide advice and insight. What is your sense of where things are leading into August 1?
Well, you know, I think that some progress has been made. Certainly on this side of the border, I think we have got our act together a lot more than we have before. And I think seeing the premiers working together and working with the Prime Minister and, you know, reaching out to the Indigenous community and everything, and these are all positive things. I think Donald Trump is feeling pretty cocky right now, full of himself, thinks he's got everybody coming to him. And so I think you can hope for a deal, right? But I think you shouldn't. We shouldn't plan on a deal. I think we got to be, because you can always get a deal, but you want to get a good deal, and that's the problem.
Well, yeah, this is the challenge, right? And getting our act together as a country. I take your point. It was very kind of scattershot in the early days, with people thinking there's a magical threshold of appeasement that would make it all go away. But there's kind of a, I don't know if it's a grim reality, but a sobering reality that seems to be setting in with, like, the Prime Minister's comments last week and a lot of the premiers now, that no one's been able to get a deal that didn't include some baseline of tariffs. I mean, do you just think that's just where this is going to land?
You know, I hope not. I mean, I guess from my perspective, the two things, regardless of what the tariff level will be or won't be, you can't have a situation where he can use 232 or IEPA at his will. So what good is it to have a deal that has minimal tariffs when tomorrow he could decide, well, no, I don't like that. I'm going to actually say Canada's imports of softwood lumber or steel or whatever are a national security threat, and I'm going to put more tariffs on. So I think we've got to deal with that, and I think, you know, we can't panic. I know it's hurting a lot of businesses and hurting a lot of people, but I think it's really good to, first of all, do some of the things we're doing in terms of diversifying our markets and also getting some U.S. businesses to understand that they do actually depend on the Canadian market and get them to speak up to the president and stuff like that. So it may take a while.
It may take a while. So, August, you had said today, July 21st, was supposed to be Retaliation Day. If the deadline of July 16th wasn't met, obviously no deal. The new target date that the president has set is the 1st of August. What are your thoughts looking at that date?
Again, I think it's, you can hope for the best but plan for the worst, and be ready if, in fact, we don't have a deal on August the 1st and, you know, there are additional tariffs put in place or whatever. But I am skeptical as to whether or not we can get a really good deal by August the 1st. I think it's going to take time.
That was the sense I had as an amateur trade expert right now, as I've consumed more trade information than I ever thought I would need to in my lifetime. But when the Prime Minister announced sort of the steel measures last week, it was about closing off the Canadian market to a degree to allow for a domestic restructuring. That strikes me as prudent, but not necessarily hopeful that the sectoral tariffs are going to go away anytime soon.
No, but I mean, I think that was also a signal to the Americans that we're prepared to, you know, I think we matched the electric vehicle tariffs.
No transshipment through Canada.
I think that's all part of this. because that was one of the Americans' concerns, and I think some of it was legitimate. So, I think the Prime Minister is doing the right things, and I think that the, seeing the premiers trying to work together, it doesn't mean everybody's going to agree all the time, but, one of the reasons we were successful in the first go-around was because all the premiers, regardless of what political stripe and all the business community and labor and everything, they really worked together with us.
Right.
When, I could always call any premier or any business leader and they would say, I'll do whatever I can. We didn't always agree, but they were always willing to lean in and help, and that's what's happening now.
Yeah, it does seem that way. For the last number of years, these meetings have often felt like proxy wars, for the national political argument that was happening between the federal conservatives and the federal liberals. But, today was supposed to be the retaliation day. We don't know what's going to happen on August 1st. At a certain point, and the Prime Minister has said this, that this cannot go on forever. This is what the 30-day timeline they agreed to in Kananaskis was supposed to kind of do. I mean, if there is no real agreement by the 1st of August, do you have to dig in and then start hitting back in a way that the Prime Minister sort of foreshadowed?
Yeah, the thing I don't think is helpful is a lot of public rhetoric.
Sure.
You may have noticed that the President of the United States doesn't take well to that kind of thing.
I picked up on that trend.
So no, I would be selective in terms of our response, in terms of any tariffs we put on, that would be designed to get influential Americans to put pressure on Trump, not to talk a lot about it, and ones that are unlikely to hurt Canadian consumers.
So do you do a targeted sort of approach like was done before? Do you hit back on steel, for example? Because the steel sector is kind of tired of not seeing the retaliatory tariffs there. I mean, what would your advice be on that sort of thing?
Well, I think there are some things that we can do on steel, but I think the other thing is, too, we need to, again, begin to leverage some of our strengths. So, a lot of the stainless steel produced is not produced in the United States. It's produced, in China and elsewhere. And yet we've got in the Ring of Fire chromite, which is used for, making stainless steel. I mean, why don't we think about trying to work with the American steel producers to find a way so that we can together build a better steel industry North American-wide?
What would you advise the premiers to be doing? Because, in the early days of this, we saw a lot of the bad cop stuff coming out of provincial governments, right? Pulling the booze off the shelves and cutting people out of procurement. Pete Hoekstra, the ambassador, has referenced the booze issue as something that has really kind of offended him. I know you're saying don't provoke, but, what should the premiers do?
I wouldn't provoke publicly. I wouldn't go out and use a lot of rhetoric. But I think those things are useful. And I think part of that is also engaging Canadians. I mean, they are Canadians from coast to coast. I've never seen this kind of, nationalism and, spirit. And if that means, boycotting American booze, so be it.
Right. We used to rally around the flag. Now we rally around the booze, right?
Yeah,
by American and European.
I'm not drinking a lot of Tito's these days. So.
me either. I wonder though. You mentioned about like the coming together here and the focus on things internally. And one of the consequences, it seems, of what President Trump has tried to do to strengthen the American economy is force a look inward to deal with some of the persistent issues that have existed inside the Canadian one. The bigger economic agenda of C5 and building bigger and building faster and sort of the various competing interests they have to take into account there. Do you see the government, the country being able to move at the speed they want to and need to without doing it in a way that it makes a bigger problem? You know what I mean? They've got to settle things with Indigenous groups.
It is really important that we get some things done quickly. I think we were talking about a lot of national projects. If nothing's really started by the end of the year, we'll be into analysis paralysis. And, fact of the matter is, government isn't great at focusing on outcomes. It's always good at focusing on process.
Right.
And one of the things I hope this does is gets us into a situation where we actually do start focusing on outcomes. And I think that's really important. I think Canadians are going to look and say, well, they're talking a lot, but what's happening? And so I think there are a number of things that could move fairly quickly. You know, you were talking with Premier Eby about Indigenous things. I was out at a conference, an LNG conference in Vancouver a couple of years ago, and there were people from all over the world. There were 15 Indigenous chiefs there supporting LNG exports, as long as they were going to be part of the the. So I think that again, you know, this is an opportunity to bring people together in this country, expand our markets to places to where we've kind of neglected it. We've been too comfortable with the relationship with the United States, and I think this is a good shot in the arm and getting us to focus on other markets and also get. I mean, I probably have told you this before, but you know, when H.R. McMaster was National Security Advisor in the first Trump years, I phoned him and said, you know, why aren't you guys doing more about buying our critical minerals, doing what you did in our aluminum industry? And he said, David, we'd love to, but we need them before 2050 when you get them out of the ground. And I think, you know, we're now kind of realizing, you know, maybe it's time for us to get our act together. And I think we're starting, and I think this whole meeting is a worthwhile initiative in that regard.
Okay. Well, on that optimistic note, we'll leave it there. I always appreciate your time. Former Canadian Ambassador to the United States, David MacNaughton. Thank you, sir.